Right. Good evening. We're here with the National Middle Level Science Teachers Association. I'll introduce our speaker in just a minute, but first I will introduce who the NMLSTA is, the National Middle Level Science Teachers Association. We're the only national organization that's geared specifically to teachers of middle school students and teachers of science. We offer these webinars to the public. We have other things as well, but we also offer our members the recordings of these webinars and ideas of the month and various other information you can find on our website. We also offer awards. Twice a year, we offer the Classroom Teacher Award, which is valued at $300, and those are offered in the spring and the fall. And the Herd Award, valued at $1,000 and sponsored by FOSS, is available the application process starts in the middle of December. So we'll be getting into that very soon. I would like to introduce our speaker. She's Melanie Trecek-King. She is an associate professor of biology at Massasoit Community College. She is the creator of Thinking is Power, and she's the educational director of the Mental Immunity Project. So she is going to share more with us about helping students be good thinkers. I will remind you that we offer certificates for participation. I will put it in the chat eventually, but send me an email. And Melanie suggests that she will leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end. Melanie, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you. And let me figure out again how to share my screen. Yes. Okay, are you seeing my screen and me? And can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so first of all, I'm so honored to be here. I am a science educator. I have been teaching science at a community college for almost 20 years now, and I specialize in courses for people who don't want to be scientists when they grow up, and I love non-majors science. But it also raised interesting questions for me because I kept thinking to myself, this was the last semester most of my students were ever going to have science. And the pressure of that really weighed heavily on me. And so what I tried to do is I created a course to teach critical thinking, information literacy, and science literacy. And much I wanted to talk about in this presentation is the backbone of how I teach critical thinking, and also the approach that I like to use. We have almost certainly all experienced students coming into our classrooms with various unscientific beliefs, and it can be difficult to reach them. And so I'm going to tell you a story, walk you through the lesson here, and then come back at the end and hopefully please bring questions. I absolutely love questions. So in 1954, there was a woman named Dorothy Martin. She was a psychic living outside of Chicago. And she received messages it started with her dead father. And she would, her medium was automatic handwriting. So she would write down the messages that she would receive. And she started to receive messages from other people. And then one morning in the spring of 1954, she woke up with a message. She started writing it down. And the message that she was receiving was from Sananda, also known as Jesus, living on the planet Clarion. So Sananda told Dorothy to gather other seekers to hear the messages from Sananda and their fellow guardians. And she gained a bit of a following. People would come to hear these prophecies. One day, Sananda told her that he was going to come in his flying spaceship and greet them. And they all rushed out. It was to a nearby Air Force base. They could not wait to meet Sananda. They waited there all day, and there was no Jesus and no flying saucer. And they were very dejected. They went home. She received a message later that there had been a man that they saw walking along the road. He looked kind of odd. They didn't think anything of it at the time, but that had been Sananda. So they were super excited. They had actually seen Jesus. Now, these messages continued for a while, and then she received a message that the earth was going to be destroyed in a global flood on December 21st. The Guardians and Sananda would come in their flying saucer and rescue Dorothy and the fellow seekers. This here, Dorothy Martin, is on the left. On the right is Charles Lawhead, who is a professor at a local college. He was one of her most supportive followers. It got picked up in the local newspaper, and Leon Festinger, who is a psychologist, was sitting reading his morning paper, drinking his coffee, and he saw this notice, and he thought, I wonder what will happen on December 22nd, when the world hadn't ended. Would they change their mind? Right? How would this process go? So he actually, he had his fellow psychologists, a lot of graduate students, infiltrate the group. And so the account of what we know about them actually comes from his book, When Prophecy Fails. I mean, I don't want to give away the ending, but the earth did not get destroyed in a flood. So what actually happened? Now we're going to come back to this. But let's start with what do we believe and why? A belief is anything that we accept as true. I know as scientists and science educators, this word is kind of a difficult word because to many it means faith. Faith is belief without evidence. A belief is anything that we accept as true, regardless of its truth. We act on our beliefs whether they're true or not. So when I'm teaching my students about how to evaluate their beliefs and evidence, then I want them to be able to understand. I'm sorry, something is happening on my screen here. I want them to be able to make better decisions because if you think it's true, then it makes sense to act on it, right? If you think the world's going to end, then it makes sense to prepare for the end of the world. Apologies, something is going on here. Oh, here's what. I was smarter than I thought when I made this show. Beliefs are different than knowledge in that knowledge is a justified true belief. In that you believe it's true, it is true, and we have good justifications for accepting that it's true. Now, the problem with this, in my mind, is that justifications piece, because we often don't have as much justifications for our beliefs as we think we do. We might feel certain that we're right, or we wouldn't hold those beliefs. But that certainty is often a feeling. It happens to us, and it isn't necessarily correlated with the amount of evidence that we have for our beliefs. So where do we come to our beliefs? There's two primary ways that we arrive at our beliefs. One is our personal experiences. I've been teaching critical thinking for a long time here, and I anecdotally hold, which is ironic, because I'm talking about personal experiences, that one of the most important first lessons for students is to recognize that their personal experiences can mislead them. Students may say, well, I know homeopathy works because I tried it and I felt better. Or I know that UFOs are real because I saw one, or I know ghosts are real. Like I have a ghost story. I actually did see a ghost once. When I was 5, my grandma was sleeping over. She was staying, visiting from a neighboring town. She was sleeping in bed next to me. And I woke up to this fingernail going up my arm like this. Like to this day, I won't sleep with my arms outside of covers. Just kind of creeps me out. So I felt this fingernail and I opened my eyes and I saw this old woman. She had long, straggly white hair and like lots of wrinkly skin. And I tried to yell at my grandma to wake up and help me. And she put her hand over my mouth. So I tried to yell louder and she put another hand on my chest and I can still feel cold and clammy and wrinkly. And now this is sleep paralysis. If you've ever experienced it, sleep paralysis is terrifying. This is the in-between state between awake and asleep. when our brains are awake, but our body is not yet awake, and your body can't move, and your brain is trying to figure out why you can't move. So what happens is your brain uses what it already knows. What does it expect for why can't I move here? What is the best explanation? Now, in my case, I was 5, and my ghost was the witch from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Right, she was terrifying, especially 5-year-old self. Like, she was honestly terrifying. That was the scariest thing my brain could think of to explain why I couldn't move. Now, if I didn't know this, like if I didn't know to this day what that was, I could look you dead in the eye and be truthful that I saw a ghost, because I did. I could believe in ghosts because I saw one. This is how we trust our personal experiences, and we need to realize that our personal experiences might be fooling us. It's also why we need science. Also, received wisdom. This is what we hear from others. We believe our parents. We believe, I mean, this time of year, we're telling our young kids that Santa Claus is real and is going to visit and bring them presents. And we set up Santas at the mall to get pictures taken with. And NORAD tracks Santa on Christmas Eve. I mean, like, we go deep with this conspiracy to try to pull this one over on our kids. They trust us, so they believe that Santa Claus is real. All of this exists in a backdrop of trust, meaning it is nearly impossible for us to verify personally and with good evidence all of our beliefs, which means that most of our beliefs happen in a passive way, and the filter is, do I trust this source? We've often heard this post-truth term. I don't really like that term. I mean, there's definitely some postmodernism and what is truth, but honestly, a lot of it comes back to trust. Instead of post-truth, post-trust. We don't trust reliable sources of information any longer. But understanding the role of trust in our belief formation underscores the importance of placing your trust wisely. All of this, by the way, is really useful in helping students understand why we need science. Like, why do we need a scientific study to help us understand if homeopathy is effective? Well, because our personal experiences could fool us. Why isn't I tried it and felt better sufficient evidence? Why do we need placebos? Why do we need to control? Why do we need to blind or double blind? So we come to our beliefs in various illogical ways. And our minds aren't blank slates. There's this, I understand it, we think that if a student doesn't accept evolution or doesn't accept climate change or the safety of vaccines, then the problem is they just don't have enough information. So if we give them enough information, they will change their minds. They don't. Sometimes they do, but it doesn't always work that way. And the reason is our minds aren't blank slates. Our beliefs are form more of a web. This is Willard Van Orman Quine's work. The web of belief idea is that all of our beliefs form interconnected nodes, so that at the center of those beliefs, the center of the web, are those beliefs that we hold most tightly to our identity. They're the most important ones to us. These are the ones where if somebody tells you you're wrong, you get triggered and defensive. But notice that those beliefs are connected to a series of other beliefs. They're all connected. They form our overall worldview. We can't go in to somebody and say, this belief right here at that node, that one is wrong. So I'm going to pull it out and get rid of it. The problem is it's connected to a bunch of other things, and that overall web is how that person makes sense of the world. We want our beliefs, we need our beliefs to be coherent, to form a consistent whole. So if we want to go in and address those beliefs, we need to realize what it's connected to address underlying motivations, which I'll get to in a second. And then also replace it with something that continues to help that person make sense of the world. So there are different kinds of beliefs. I use the terms falsifiable and unfalsifiable. Falsifiability is a key concept in science. I know some educators use testable, which I think is pretty similar. So if you prefer, but not all beliefs are evidence-based, in that a falsifiable belief or a testable belief is one in which we could use evidence to potentially disprove it. Some beliefs inherently are not falsifiable. They cannot be disproven with evidence. The problem is these unfalsifiable beliefs are often very important to us. And so we often find the evidence that we need to justify those beliefs to ourselves while neglecting the important first step of, is this actually an evidence-based belief? Let me give you some examples. One category is subjective beliefs. These are things like opinions, values, preferences, identities. So like you'll see a theme here. I like to use non-triggering beliefs and claims to teach these skills. So I will always use cats if given a chance. So I will say that cats make the best pets. Okay. I could give you evidence for that. Like cats are quiet, they're self-cleaning. In February in Massachusetts, when it's cold and snowy outside, I don't have to take him outside, right? I can sit in bed and cuddle with my cat and watch all those suckers out there with dogs, walking their dogs in the cold and dark. Okay. Now it's an opinion, right? So it's not an evidence-based claim. But also notice how these subjective beliefs are often some of the ones we care about the most and we fight about a lot. And to fight over them, we give people our evidence. This is why I'm right, while neglecting that this isn't an evidence-based belief. Another example is vague beliefs. Things like this supplement improves overall health and wellness. Supplements by law cannot make specific health claims, so they make vague ones, like boost the immune system. That actually means nothing. But if I'm scrolling through the aisle of the supplements and I see something like, wow, that is awesome sauce. It looks really great. The power of vague claims is actually their vagueness, because they allow us to impart on them what we want to be true. Personality, you have a need to be liked and admired by people. There are times whether you've done or said the right thing, right? Horoscopes, personality assessment, all of these are so vague that they could apply to basically anything. But we think, wow, yeah, that is so neat. Okay, so is it vague or can it be falsified? Is it supernatural? Now, this is one where we can get into a bit of hot water if we go into claims that students feel very strongly about. So here's what I do. You know Pythagoras, like of Pythagorean theorem fame? Okay, so Pythagoras thought that when you farted, you lost your soul. Okay, so I'll tell my students that he wouldn't eat beans. He was afraid to eat beans because he didn't want to lose his soul. So I'll tell my students this and they laugh and laugh and laugh and I'll say, okay, test that. Like, wait, what? Like, no, really, test that. When you fart, you lose your soul. And every time it goes something like this conversation. Well, do I lose my soul when I burp too? I don't know. You're testing this. You let me know. Right? Okay. Well, wait, my dog farts. Does my dog have a soul? Right? One recently is my absolute favorite. If somebody else farts and I breathe it in, do I get part of their soul? And then finally somebody will go, wait a minute. How do you measure a soul? What's a soul? Ding, ding, ding. That's the point, right? Is we can't actually test that. Could it be true? Could we lose our soul when we farted? I suppose so. But it's not an evidence-based claim. There's a distinction between the fart and why you farted, by the way, or the consequences of the fart. I love fart jokes too, right? Because everybody laughs at farts. This is universally funny. The fart is objective. It is measurable. What's not measurable is like you farted because God put a spell on you or that you lost your soul. So there's different parts of these claims, and teasing them apart is important. And it's a really important step for critical thinking. So here's step one when evaluating our beliefs. Is this an evidence-based belief? If it's not, I'm not saying it's not important. I'm not saying it's not true, but I do want you, my students, to put this in a category in your head of unfalsifiable, not evidence-based. And I'm going to resist the urge to try and use evidence to support it. This is when all else fails and it is falsifiable and it has been falsified, but we really want it to be true. And so we make excuses. Conspiracy theorists are masters at this, by the way. So like conspiracy theories by their nature are immune to evidence. All evidence is reinterpreted to be part of the conspiracy. Like missing evidence was covered up, right? It's been hidden. Evidence that would disprove the conspiracy was planted. It was a false flag, something like that. So this is what we do, the motivated reasoning involved when we want to protect a belief. Okay, evidence-based beliefs. Now, here's a problem. We don't perceive reality as it is, but we think we do. I know you've seen the dress. My students have all seen the dress. It's still super fun to be in a room full of people. You could say, well, who here sees this as blue and black? Okay, I do. Who here sees this as white and gold? Okay. And then let them talk it out. Because next thing you know, they're going to be like, oh, wait, what do you see? How in the world could you? It is so much fun to be in a room full of people who see something differently. Think about this. This is the color of a dress. It is the color of a dress. The only reason that we know that people saw this differently was because it went viral. And then we realized just how divided we were. This was the dress that broke the internet. Our perceptions are limited. They're flawed. They are constructed based on what we already think we know. Like people didn't see UFOs, flying saucers in the sky, until there was a whole industry of sci-fi after the space race started. For the first time in human history, there was a chance that we left the planet. Okay, what's out in the sky? Next thing you know, there's like comic books and theme parks and then people were primed to see UFOs. And so they did. So the power of diversity here, though, is that so you see black and white, or blue and black, I see white and gold. Imagine, instead of fighting this out, being curious about, wait a minute, you see something different. That is fascinating. I wonder what the real color of the dress is. Could I be wrong? And working together to test these hypotheses. In science, the diversity of perspectives gives us more testable hypotheses from which to not only test, but ways to test them. It doesn't mean every perspective is right. It does mean that it gives us another opportunity to see something we wouldn't see on our own. There's a concept in psychology called naive realism, which is that we think we experience reality as it is. I see it as it is. Now, if somebody disagrees with me, so if somebody else sees this as white and gold, wow, how can you see that as white and gold? It's obviously blue and black. Let me explain to you why. Okay, that doesn't work? Wow, you must be stupid. Or you are really misinformed. Or you are evil. It's the color of a dress. Imagine political tribes ideological tribes forming around the different ways that we see this dress because we actually are seeing it differently. Now, there is a reality outside of our heads. But if our goal is to actually understand that reality, then we need to realize that we don't have a direct access to it. Even with the same information, we can reach different conclusions. This is a Pew polling of people who lean right and people who lean left over time on the strength of the US economy. Okay, now what happened in 2000, 2001 versus 2008, 2009 versus 2016, 2017? Those are presidential elections, right? George W. Bush, overnight, Republicans thought the economy was awesome. Democrats thought it was in the pooper. In Obama election, overnight, it flipped. Trump elected, overnight, it flipped. Imagine how we perceive news. There are studies on protests where you show people videos of protests along with different signs. And if they agree with what's on the sign, it is not violent. But if they don't, it is violent. Same protest. You ever watched a sporting event with somebody who's rooting for the other team? They actually can see a different game. That study called They Saw a Game. The same kind of thing. Our perceptions can, our beliefs can influence our perceptions, and our tribalism can influence our perceptions. Add to that, we all have our own realities online these days. Something fun that I do with my students is I'll have them pull up their phones, say, go to your favorite social media app. Now, don't show anybody that something that you don't want them to see, but get with somebody who's not in your friend group and scroll through a bit and see what's on there. We don't seem to understand that our brains are being filled with information that is being algorithmically delivered to us to keep us on these platforms. And that happens, the average person is online for what, 7 hours a day? Imagine how that impacts your worldview. The information that's coming into your brain versus what's going into my brain. Okay, we are not as rational as we think we are. The elephant and the rider analogy I find is a really useful concept for helping students to understand the different parts of their thinking. This is very similar to Daniel Kahneman's System 1 and System 2, but riders and elephants are, I think, easier for students to understand. The idea is that imagine in your brain, you have an elephant, and then you have a rider on top of the elephant. So the rider is your part of your brain that you generally think of as you. It can think critically. It is the part that it's hard work. You have to turn it on. It's voluntary, but it can do much better work. But it sits on top of an elephant, and the elephant is strong, it's powerful, it's always on, and it's motivated by its intuitions, its biases, its emotions. So when the elephant is emotional, it jumps to a conclusion or new information, biases, jumps to a conclusion, and the writer, we think the writer goes, oh, is this true? Let me think through it and evaluate the evidence. And no, the writer then goes, yeah, that sounds about right. And then, if asked, here are all of the reasons why my elephant is right. So we're often using our writers to justify our elephant's decisions as opposed to using our writers to think critically. It is hard work to think critically, so often we take the easier way out. Example, I really like cake. I like frosting. Honestly, I love frosting, buttercream frosting. A cake is the vehicle for frosting. But I know it's not good for me. So let's say that I have cake and my elephant is like, eat the cake, right? My writer could override my elephant, but my elephant is rampaging and telling me to eat that cake. So instead, my writer goes, well, you were really good today. You had a salad for lunch. You worked out. You won't eat cake again tomorrow. Notice my writer's just coming up with justifications to support my elephant's decisions. This is happening all the time without our awareness. The more motivated our elephant, the more driven our writer can be to find justifications. Here are some of the things that motivates our elephants. Biases. By biases here, I mean cognitive biases. There's about 200 and some of them at this point. There's a few key ones I think that would be most important for introductory classes. It hates uncertainty. So any chance to resolve certainty, to make you feel like you know, even if you don't know, our identity and tribe, our emotions, what we want to believe or what we don't want to believe. Actually, a strong component of science denial is driven by identity, right? Thinking about a student who does not want to accept evolution. It's coming from an identity, from emotions, from the consequences, perceived consequences of accepting something like that. The same thing is true for climate change denial, or all of these factors are involved, which is why we can't just solve this problem with more information. So I call this the overconfidence cycle. What happens when our elephant is motivated is that motivated reasoning kicks in, confirmation bias kicks in, and then we get really confident that we're right. Motivated reasoning is the motivated driven reasoning. I'm saying this, I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. It is driven by our underlying desires. The more motivated we are, the stronger it is. Confirmation bias is once we already believe something, we tend to see and interpret evidence to support it. And both of those give us evidence. And so why are we confident or overconfident? Well, it's because we have evidence. And then once we're overconfident, more motivated reasoning and confirmation bias, and the cycle goes on and on. Daniel Kahneman was once asked if he had a magic wand that could remove one thing from the world, what would it be? And he said overconfidence. You can't learn if you're confident that you're right. Have you ever tried to talk to somebody who is wrong, but really sure they're right? You cannot break through. Overconfidence is a real impediment to learning. We are especially motivated to defend beliefs tied to our identity. When we especially proclaim these beliefs publicly, when we signal these beliefs or identity beliefs, they become part of our brand, how we portray ourselves to the world. Threats to those beliefs are then seen as threats to us. The part of our brain that's activated when there's a physical threat is activated when there's a threat to these core beliefs. So this gets stronger for more important beliefs. And then, similar to our personal identity, there's our social identity. The truth is tribal. We as humans are social creatures, and we organize ourselves around people who are like us. The problem is that we can go online to find people who believe the same things that we do, no matter how out there and wrong those beliefs are. But once we do, they become part of our tribe and we coalesce around those beliefs. Now, it is nearly impossible that we are right about everything, and it's nearly impossible that our tribes are right about everything. But just like it is difficult to be objective about a belief that's tied to our identity. Have you ever noticed how much harder it is to disagree with your social group than it is them? Like telling your tribe that they're wrong about something, you risk losing your support structure, your connections. So these factors all play into how we form our beliefs and then hold on to them. This, speaking of being triggered, this is one of these phrases that triggers me because it is true that facts don't care about your feelings. However, it is much more complicated than this. facts aren't always neutral, in that we can select facts to make nearly argument we want to make. I could tell you, for example, that water is harmful because nearly all synthetic pesticides are made with water, and water is the leading cause of drowning, or that 100% of serial killers have admitted to drinking water. No, all of those things are true. But what I just did was I selected those facts to make a case that was not true. So it's not about the facts themselves, it's about how we use them. Okay. One of my favorite things to do, especially online, when I'm talking with somebody who is positive that they know that climate change is not real, or that 5G is I'm messing up my conspiracy theories, something about 5G and vaccines. I don't know. None of it makes sense. Okay, so explain to me how it works. There's been really fascinating studies on things like toilets and bikes, where it asks people, how well do you know how a toilet works? And most people are like, yeah, I know how a toilet works. With my students, one of the questions I'll ask them is, how well do you know how a text message sends, or how to send a text message? They're like, oh, yeah. You type it in and you press send. I think you're missing a few steps, right? Because the next step is, well, explain, how does a toilet work? Draw a toilet, draw a bicycle, create it from scratch. I love this meme. I'd love to go back in time and blow people's minds with my incredible knowledge. But how do you make this electricity? Right? We think we know more than we do, and we don't know what we don't know until we have to explain it. So this is actually a great way to counter overconfidence. Oh, you're really sure that vaccines cause autism? Explain that. Want to talk about seekers? Okay, now you know the world didn't end. But here's the thing, they thought it was going to, and so they acted on their beliefs. They were convinced that the world was going to end on December 21st. They gave away money, belongings, they lost their jobs. Some of them lost their families, their kids. They moved in with Dorothy, they prepared. They were told that they couldn't wear metal on the spaceship because it would interfere with, I don't know, power fields or something. And so they took out tooth fillings and got rid of the zippers in their pants, and like underwires in their bras. And so they were told December 21st was the date, but they were also told that they could come at any time, so be prepared. Now, on December 17th, they got a phone call from Captain Video from outer space, who said that a flying saucer was going to land in Dorothy's backyard at 4 o'clock. They rushed out and got ready. No flying saucer. They didn't realize that this was apparently a popular TV show at the time. They got pranked by a radio program. People were laughing at them, right? This was the doomsday cult, the weirdos that thought that the world was going to end and Jesus was coming in a flying saucer. Okay, on December 18th, they got another message that the aliens were coming now. Nobody showed up. They wondered if maybe they'd missed something, like, did they forget tooth fillings or... Okay, but they knew the real date was December 21st. So that evening, can you imagine? They had given up everything. They had been mocked and shunned by the outside world. At midnight, they had been singing Christmas carols, waiting for Jesus to come save them. At midnight, no aliens. At 12:05, no aliens, but somebody noticed that the clock was wrong, so they had a few more minutes. At 12:10, Dorothy announced that there was going to be a slight delay in plans. A couple of hours later, she received a message that they should take a coffee break. At 4 o'clock in the morning, this is coming from Leon Fessinger, right? The group was absolutely stunned silent. Like, what had they missed? They had given up a lot. So do you think they changed their mind? Do you think at this point they're like, oh, you know what? This whole thing, we're so wrong about that. We should just go out and tell everybody, you know what? We were wrong. No. Um, at 4:45, Dorothy got a message that the world had been spared from destruction because of their belief. So they actually saved the world. It was at this point they actually started to proselytize, because up to this point they'd been pretty insular, but now they saved the world. Thank you very much, right? Come follow us. This came from Charles Lawhead. He says, I've given up just about everything. I've cut every tie. I've burned every bridge. I've turned my back on the world. I can't afford to doubt. I have to believe. They had been mocked. They lost social ties with basically everybody but other believers. They had invested and staked their public reputations on it. It is hard to be wrong. It's not our belief that was wrong. We were wrong. The pain of admitting that is just too much. We need to save space, save face. This is important for dealing with people who hold these extreme views, or views that don't align with what we know to be the truth. If we want to have any hope of reaching them, mocking them will not work. It just sends them further into that belief and to others who share that belief. We need to be the places where people can go to ask honest questions. So modeling that kind of curiosity and openness and skepticism, and being that safe place for them. So why don't facts change minds? Because it's not about facts. It's not about facts. It's about the underlying motivations. We think that in a conversation, my writer is talking to your writer. And obviously my writer is really smart because, I've got evidence, but there's four of you in a conversation. Almost certainly our reasoning is being driven by our elephant's motivations, but so is theirs. So these big disagreements where we're fighting about facts, we're throwing facts at each other and wondering why they won't change their minds. There's lots of reasons for that, but primarily it's not about the facts. There is an underlying motivation for what is causing their writer to select the facts that they're selecting. If we want to want to reach people, digging down to that elephant level, connecting with people there, trying to understand what is motivating that belief is a better chance of reaching them. So the take homes here. Our elephants are behind most of our reasoning. Our writers can think critically, but we have to be taught to do it. And we have to want to do it. Knowing how to think critically is not enough. Now, the training wheels approach here is the approach that I've taken with this whole presentation. The idea with the training wheels approach is that you start with beliefs that aren't triggering. Start with farts and cats and Jesus on spaceships, because nobody is going to be offended by those things. They can learn the skills and work them out on the less important beliefs, and then you can graduate to the hills and taking off the training wheels. I do this exercise with my students. I think for the sake of time, I'm going to leave this here for now. It's on my website if you're interested in seeing it. It's a basic epistemology exercise I introduced early in the semester. I've covered basically all of these topics here. I address it in my class. I start with witchcraft. I move on to like ghosts and psychics, and move on to the other stuff. But it's a structured way of helping students think through some of these beliefs. So I teach a class designed to teach these skills. And then I thought, well, maybe people who aren't my students might want to hear some of these things. So I created the website Thinking is Power. The idea is that knowledge is power, but there's too much to know. So, and we carry access to basically all of humanity's knowledge in our pockets. And so I tell fart jokes and cat jokes now publicly with Comic Sans and fun colors, because critical thinking also doesn't have to be stuffy. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you, middle school educators, for all it is that you do, and for hosting me. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a couple, but my first one is, Dorothy Martin, did she live a long, healthy life after that? Did she become the butt? Did her people turn on her? What happened to her?
You know, there were some people that that went away from the group. She did continue to get a following. I think she moved locations. I could be wrong about that. And she did live quite a bit longer. Also, her actual name, I'm not sure, is Dorothy Martin, or if that was the name that he gave her. So she does go by another name as well. But yeah, she did continue to to try to gain a following.
Wow.
It worked.
Right, right. It's pretty amazing what people, I mean, we see that. Um, what have you tried with middle school students? Have you used some of these with middle school students?
I don't teach middle school, but I work with other educators who do. Bertha Vasquez is a really good friend of mine and has used some of the things that I have developed in her class as well. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I like the fart one. That would go over well for that would definitely work with middle school kids.
You know
Not,
what? People of all ages love farts.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So not a question, but just glad to see another Carl Sagan fan. I use him frequently in my teaching. Watched Cosmos as a kid.
Carl
In,
Sagan.
yep. I
Did I
let
answer all of your questions?
I was thinking something else and I am not remembering what it was. It's information to, I mean, it's interesting to teach in a Catholic school too, because the idea of belief as opposed to evidence-based science is one that we have to talk about. We absolutely have to, because there is a significant difference. And so we have to make sure that we're on the same page kind of with what we learn in a religion class and what we learn in a science class, and that they are not incompatible, but that they're different and they apply to different things. And that's what's really important, is that they apply to different things.
I'm a big fan of Stephen Jay Gould's NOMA, or non-overlapping magisteria. And so I reference him quite often, but also just early on in the semester, this separating claims and beliefs by whether they're falsifiable or not.
Mhm.
And then separating so that, for example, students can feel that they can continue to believe in God without that conflicting with scientific findings.
Exactly. Exactly. So I can address those things directly in a Catholic school. Lots of other people can't in a public school, for example, but it's all going to come up because you have a variety of students and a variety of belief systems and a variety of backgrounds.
Hmm.
Makes it interesting.
How does that come up in the public schools? I mean, I haven't been teaching, and I've been in and out of some classrooms with some parts of the science where, yes, there have been students who blatantly do not agree with what I'm saying or trying to teach them, because to them, that's not right. But how do you do that? And how do you do that, Peter, Dave?
Do questions like that come up in your classrooms? Or do they just steer away?
You talking to me?
No.
No.
No, I'm talking to the boys there. They're in the schools.
Interesting.
Sometimes you have to kind of make a metaphor, like, to being an umpire. Like science calls it as they see it, versus
Okay.
or instead of the umpire that is like it is what it is because I said it was so. You know what I mean? Not to get sports analogy on you, but
It's a good way to think.
The kids understand it that way.
yeah, I mean, there's always botch calls that they could complain hours on end about. You know, so
Cool.
There's
Well,
a
go
I
ahead.
a comic that I love to use. It is a king you imagine from way back, and he's saying something like, our ships are sinking because Neptune is punishing us for tolerating the left-handed. And so again, it's one of those non-triggering ways to get across that, you know, this isn't a claim that's falsifiable, without addressing some of the beliefs that students actually bring to class with them. Hopefully they can make those connections for themselves.
Right. Can make for some very interesting classes. Are you looking at the chat? What are your thoughts on people who go bowling, release the ball, but then dance to have the ball move left or right? Yeah. Ball right, go, go, go.
I think it would make for a fun test design.
Measure how often it works.
I could just see a bunch of your students, Peter, at the alley on 245 trying that out. David's chuckling too at this.
I think I'm going to stop the recording. And before I do that, thank Melanie so much for coming. We have a small but mighty turnout here. I know the weather has been a challenge in much of the country. Thank you so much for coming, Cornelia. It's nice to have you here as well. And thank you very, very much from the National Middle Level Science Teachers Association.
Thank you.
And do you want to mention your email address for those who might want professional development?
Yes, please. Melanie at thinkingispower.com.
And Anne needs to give her so she can.
Oh, you meant Anne. Yes.
Anne.
But
Yeah, that's
no.
okay.
And what is it's A. Forgot my.
Melanie, do you have any objections to us posting this on our NMLSTA YouTube channel? It's small but growing.
Not at all.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a great let me unrecord. Have a great night, everybody. It's great to see you here. And
See you Sunday.
okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Melanie. Thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you. It was wonderful. Thanks.
Can always count on you, Peter. Okay. I wasn't even gonna